and then have a roll call.
Alderperson Robinson. Pert. Gilbert. Swanson.
Here.
Parker.
Here.
Poulos.
Here.
Healy.
Here.
And Mayor Tomes.
Here.
We have a quorum.
The Alderman Judith Gilbert is ill and would like to get permission to join us remotely, so we would need a vote to do that. So
You need a
some-
motion on that?
Need a motion on that?
Move to approve the Alderperson Gilbert joining remotely.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Judith, I don't know if you're logged in there yet.
Yes, present.
Okay, there we are. Judith is present. All right, public comment. Nothing there. Presentation, Public Works, jumps right in. Dumpsters. Talk trash.
Trash talking, I told you.
All right, good evening, everyone. Is there a clicker for the slides, or?
Tim's got, oh.
All right, good evening, everyone. Pretty simple proposal tonight, hopefully. Should make it nice and painless here. So we'll just kind of dive right in. So one of the reoccurring issues that, you know, my tenure here at the city, you know, Mike can attest to this, and now that Jack has been involved with the downtown, a reoccurring theme we get is overflowing dumpsters, alleys with debris in them, illegal dumping. I'm sure Alderman Healy has kind of experienced some of this. I'm sure Alderman Parker has heard about this. So what we wanted to do here is take a closer look at it. So we started diving into the ordinance a little bit, and we found some weak points there and some challenges. So essentially what the objective here tonight, we want to talk a little bit about the issue, what the current ordinance says, and then what some modifications to that ordinance that we can bring back to council and hopefully get approved to help with this situation. So objective today is to discuss the ordinance to address blight, sanitation issues affiliated with commercial trash containers. So as I said, one of the more frequent complaints we hear about the downtown is issues with commercial trash. All right, so just a little caveat disclosure here. The purpose of this presentation, we're not trying to pick on anyone or any businesses or any haulers. This is an issue that no hauler is immune to, no business is immune to. It's prevalent across the downtown as a whole. So we are going to have some photos here, but please, we're not, the intent here is not to throw anybody under the bus. So diving right in here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to just kind of show you some issues of some of the blight and the issues we have with dumpsters in the downtown. So right here, you know, you have the container on the left. There's no lid on it. We got a mattress thrown in the one on the right. So we'll just kind of work our way through here. And I'd like to thank Jack. He provided a lot of these photos. We've kind of collected them over the years. So we kind of had this old folder in the Public Works drive of, you know, kind of dumpsters issues in case this day ever presented itself, and here we are. So right here, two dumpsters, you know, you got the one on the left, has some graffiti on it. The one on the right, obviously overflowing a little bit. You know, again, overflowing dumpsters. You know, lid's not closed all the way. Lid open, you know, you kind of get the idea here. And I'd also like to add the caveat, when we bring these issues to businesses' attention and the haulers' attention, they're all very, generally speaking, pretty quick to address them. But we'll get into one of the issues with this here in a few. Give you some more photos. I mean, the two containers on the right, lids wide open, you know, so those lids, they're open, things blow around. The one on the left, obviously, is just despicable. You know, again, overflowing dumpsters. So here's a dumpster, you know, on the left, I mean, ideally that's what you're looking for, right? You know, they have a lock bar on it, the lid's closed, and then on the right, you have, you know, not locked. And we all know how that goes. If there's an open dumpster, it's not locked, you know, somebody's cruising to get rid of their shingles or whatever, you know, whatever it is. So, you know, sometimes this is affiliated with a business, but other times it's just flat out illegal dumping. Like here, probably unlikely that this business did this. However, it's, entirely possible somebody just backed in this alley with a pickup truck and dumped all that debris. But one of the issues you run into is where there's shade, there's mold, right? So this is all the same alley here. Let me go back here. If you're looking to do something, to do a little illegal dumping, generally speaking, you don't choose the clean, illuminated, nice area, right? You look for that dark alley, often one of John Gripp's parks, in the ravine, and you throw your mattress there, right? Probably in a scenario like this, you have the construction fence. It's kind of secluded. In fact, this is just the alley. Get my bearings here, literally right across the parking lot here by the federal courthouse. And somebody saw this blight. They backed in and unloaded all that junk. That's my theory here. Same alley, just absolute filth. I'd like to thank Inspections for helping us remediate this, but the key is to try and keep it from getting that level in the first place. So our current ordinance, dumpsters are required to be serviced once a week. Never happens, right? And I think a lot of that has to do with an awareness issue. Zoning and Public Works, combination between the two, have the authority to require dumpsters on private property to be enclosed or screened. So if you have a business, there's things going on through zoning or Mike's authority, they can be directed to move their dumpster, they can be directed to screen it. However, as Leslie, I'm sure, can attest to, the devil is in the details. In our current ordinance, something all these dumpsters have in common, they're not on private property. So I'm not an attorney, but if this were to be challenged, well, technically, I'm not so sure the city has the authority to regulate dumpsters in the right-of-way in the same capacity it does on private property with zoning. So a little bit of a nuance there that we would need to iron out. With our current ordinance, non-compliance would follow our standard nuisance violation procedures. Letter in the mail, X amount of days to abate. If not, Public Works will do it for you, send you a bill. All right, so the challenges with the way the current ordinance is structured, I would say the biggest challenge is if we go back to those photos, how do we know whose dumpster it is? I mean, that is really the biggest challenge is, who do I call? Hey, this dumpster's overflowing. Whose is it? No idea. Like I said, most businesses, if you bring it to their attention, they're going to rectify it. Trouble is, how do we bring it to somebody's attention if we don't know who it belongs to? You also have multiple service providers, right? So, you could have one dumpster being serviced on Monday, another one on Tuesday, and so you kind of got this hodgepodge of haulers throughout the downtown. A lot of times the haulers don't know about the weekly dump requirement. So, they're going to service at whatever interval the customer requests. And then finally, you have the abuse of dumpsters via illegal dumping. So again, if we can kind of create a cleaner environment based on what I've seen in my experience, generally speaking, that aspect of it will kind of remedy itself. Not always, but you do generally see a level improvement. Parks is a great example. We have an area at Lincoln Park off on that east end. People like to dump back there. You go back in there, you trim the trees, make it a little bit more visible, get the lights working again, and it kind of stops. Not always, but kind of does. All right, so oftentimes when, the lens, when we're trying to remedy these issues, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. You can go out and generally look at what other communities are doing. We're obviously not the first community who's experienced issues with dumpsters in their downtown, right? So Jack actually, through some of his interactions, one community we actually spoke with was Iowa City. So we got in touch with them. We had some communications with their Public Works and, you know, kind of, we actually talked to haulers that were involved in these sorts of things at other communities, and we asked, you know, like Republic Services, hey, what do you guys see working in other areas, what doesn't work? And we looked at that to kind of come up with solutions here. So Iowa City, for an example, they have one exclusive hauler through their entire downtown. And then another solution, so let me backpedal here. Registration, so people have to register their dumpsters, and I'll get into the details on these a little bit more. An exclusive hauler throughout the downtown, and then consolidation. So registration, so here's actually a dumpster in Iowa City. You can see there in the top left, it says what the business is, what their address is. So that's incredibly helpful, right? And there's a lot of different ways you can do this. So right there, we can say, what's that, Fry the Coop? You can call up them, say, hey, you know, just notice your lid wasn't closed, you know, send them a letter, whatever you need to do there. Oh, Lincoln Park, I'm sorry, yeah, Lincoln Park, Chicago. So, thanks, Jack. So, you know, that's the registration element seems to be something that was homogeneous throughout all the communities we talked with, you know, registering those dumpsters. You know, another option, you could just put like a number on it, you know, number 1, Bill Healy, Stern Center, you know, so you have like an inventory, just, you know who it belongs to. All right, so registration benefits. The biggest benefit is there's clear accountability there. You know whose dumpster that belongs to. You know, when you require business and property owners to register their dumpsters, we can gain insight to who owns what, and if there's an issue, it's easier to bring it to their attention. So again, this information is invaluable in a non-compliance scenario. It also provides a legal framework for enforcement. So if it has to go to that level, you've kind of eliminated the debate. You know, well, that wasn't my dumpster, that was so-and-so, you know, it helps streamline that process. All right, so drawbacks. The process of registering dumpsters does introduce an additional administrative task, both for the business and the city. So a business will need to allocate time to register their dumpster, obviously. And then on the government side, somebody's going to have to, receive that, house that inventory. And then generally speaking, there is going to be some staff time, so you would probably want some sort of nominal fee associated with that. So that is the drawbacks of registration. All right, exclusive provider. This is the Iowa City model here, and we'll go through some slides. As you can see, Iowa City, completely different environment. Now, I mean, some things you're never going to eliminate completely. I mean, you are going to experience, you know, lids not being shut, that sort of thing. But you have, in the case of Iowa City, it's Republic Services. They have exclusive hauling rights to the entire downtown. And that was done through a competitively bid process. So here you can see much different environment. Everything's neat, everything's organized. That one dumpster there does have a little, it is overflowing a little bit. I say easy compliance. You know exactly who that belongs to. So benefits, consistent level of service. You know exactly what day they're going to be there every single week. You can also communicate, put an accountability aspect on the hauler. You know, if someone goes down an alley, empties a dumpster, and debris falls out, and the driver doesn't get out of the truck and pick it up, who's responsible for that? Well, which hauler was it? We don't know. It could be one of 5 here, probably in Rock Island. In Iowa City, you know exactly who it was. It was Republic Services, right? So with a single provider, they're responsible for all the waste management. Scheduling becomes more efficient, leading to more reliable pickup times. Enhanced consistency, improved cleanliness. It does give a certain advantage to businesses, right? So if you're a new business coming into the downtown, you have 2 things going for you. The first is the city has already done the due diligence and competitively shopped, and in theory got you the lowest price. You don't have to shop around yourself. All you got to do is call one number, and that hauler knows exactly what to do. So that is one angle. You do have an efficiency as a business. You've already had somebody go to bat for you and get you the lowest price. Businesses would not need to shop around for service providers. They know if they're in this district, this is the number they call. There's a level of efficiency to that. Drawbacks. You are creating a monopoly in a certain district in your downtown, right? So that's a fair argument. Do you really want to stifle competition? What if, a business owner, they've used ABC refuse hauling for 20 years. They have a relationship with them and they're happy with it. Maybe they're not the cheapest. They like them. Bob's his brother-in-law. I don't know. Maybe they just like using that hauler, right? So do we want to limit that? Another scenario you run into, and probably the biggest challenge with the exclusive hauler, is a lot of businesses are already in contracts with haulers. So you'd have this cluster of a transition period while you're trying to get everybody onto the same hauler. The city would also have to enforce that, right? So if you see a dumpster that pops up and say, hey, you're not in this district, we'd have to tell them to kick rocks. So again, you have another level of enforcement there. Another option, Mike and I were kind of talking about this. Logistically, this one is challenging. Consolidation, sometimes does it make sense for business A, B, C, and D, each one of them to have their own dumpster when all of them could probably benefit from they could all get their trash into one dumpster? So that makes a lot of sense. Now implementing that becomes challenging, right? If that dumpster is full, overflowing, if there's an issue, well, whose responsibility is it, right? You got 5 different people using it. So, you may look at your ordinance having some sort of authority that could be delegated to the public works director saying, hey, we've had complaints, issues here, we need you guys there's not space, this alley's too narrow, whatever it is. You may want to give yourself some flexibility to have some influence in those situations. However, logistically, this would be challenging. However, there's obvious benefits to it, right? So if you can organically encourage businesses to share dumpsters, that's wonderful. Mandating it gets a little bit more tricky. And I'll just kind of skip through that slide. I already talked about that. All right, so kind of just a recap here. Things we can implement to improve the situation. Having people register their dumpsters, having an exclusive provider, and encouraging consolidation where it makes sense. So what we're recommending here is kind of a phased approach. It may not be necessary to jump right away to an exclusive hauler. So we think we can gain a lot of ground just by having people register their dumpsters, tweaking that ordinance a little bit to give us a little bit more flexibility and enforcement. And we think that will create a huge level of improvement in the downtown. So part of that process is, phase 1, we would put together an ordinance, bring it back to council for review and all that. Assuming that gets implemented, we would, get that process rolling and then really kind of monitor the situation and see if we're seeing a level of improvement. Assess the impact. Again, it's pretty black and white. Are we seeing a cleaner downtown, right? And then based on that, you're going to move one way or another from there, based on the level of improvement you are or are not seeing. So evaluate whether additional improvements are needed. And then, one of the most important elements here is just that community engagement every step of the way. The objective here, I think most businesses would agree that this is an issue, right? Nobody is going to be thrilled about, it's just one more thing. I go to City Hall, I got to register my dumpster, blah, blah, blah. Look at the city rock on, trying to make life hard on businesses, I think everybody would agree that it's, when you go back and you see some of these photos, it's hard to argue that, is this what you want? And this isn't isolated to any one area. I mean, pick any given alley in the downtown, right? So I think everybody agrees that, hey, we need to rein this in. And this is Public Works' attempt to, move this in a better direction. And again, I don't think we need to get too aggressive or administratively burdensome on anyone here, but we just need proper ways to identify whose dumpsters belong to who. That way we can reach out to them and say, hey, you got an issue with your dumpster. And overall, in our attempts to do this, most people have been very responsive. So, Jack, anything you want to add there?
Great job, by the way. This is exciting stuff in the place management, placemaking realm. Creating a cleaner downtown may not be sexy to the general public, but I think it is to us. I think there will be some natural opportunities to explore consolidation, one of which is the Arts Alley project, where we have budgeted some funds to do dumpster consolidation as part of the improvements to that space. The other is the potential, I think, in ongoing negotiations about the alley between 2nd and 3rd Avenue and 18th and 19th Street, the Starcrest block that connects the two retail corridors. There are potentially a couple spots in that alleyway that would be perfect for some enclosures that would hopefully lead to consolidation. So, just a couple of points that I wanted to add in. Great job.
Thanks, Jack. So yeah, that's an excellent point. This is one of those little things that, if we want to create a downtown that people want to be in, it's all these little things that you may not even conscientiously think about. But, when you look at where we're at and then you look at Iowa City, right, you will not see this there. So if we're trying to create a people-friendly environment, this is just one of those fundamental things that needs to be addressed. So that's what we have. Any questions?
Was there any cost, anybody have a cost put to the registration deal? Or is it free?
We have not thought that far into it.
But did we ask if Iowa City or LaSalle or what are the other ones you talked to? Whether their registration part of it?
They do have a
charge?
fee, what it is, but we can certainly get that, what some of the other communities are doing. So we would kind of, based on the route we went, we kind of calculate staff time into it and use that to kind of come up with a fee. It may be a scenario where, hey, it's just so-and-so comes down, they say this dumpster's at 123 3rd Avenue, and this is my business, and, there may not need to be a fee. But generally speaking, we probably would have a fee associated with that.
Did you guys go any farther to think about like what department would take care of? Is it CD? Is it Public Works? Is it?
Probably would need to be a combination of the two, because the way the existing ordinance is currently structured, CED has the enforcement, or it's run through the nuisance violation process. So we would obviously consult with Leslie to try and figure out, what's the best way to craft that ordinance. So.
I do have a question. I think the registration process is great. I mean, I think part of that then factors into asking the businesses, what do they think about it, instead of us creating something that we just tell them what they have to do. It may be beneficial and easier if initially we sent somebody to each of the businesses to ask them to do the registration process there. That might alleviate some pushback on it. And I guess my only other concern is when you consolidate the locations of them, those businesses that have the dumpsters close to their business, that they are not held responsible for maintaining, is everything put in the dumpster, is there stuff, they're not responsible for maintaining the cluster of dumpsters. And also, and the reason I say this is because there was so much pushback with the downtown on Project Now moving into that Starcrest building, that I would hate to see those dumpsters consolidated back there, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's just what we thought, trashy dumpsters are not maintaining stuff, and it reflects negatively on a business that has the consolidated dumpsters near them. So I would just, I guess, be really cautious if we go consolidation, that they're not tagged or tied to a particular business or building.
Absolutely. That's almost a word-for-word conversation Mike and I had earlier this week. So, yeah, we agree. The consolidation, if it happens organically amongst businesses and one business says, hey, you throw your trash in my dumpster, at the end of the day, they're still accountable for that dumpster, right? So if it happens organically, we would certainly not want to get in the way of that. But for all the reasons you just mentioned, mandating it would be very challenging. And as far as notifying businesses and getting their input, would love to throw Jack under the bus on that. So,
You would think that it could drive the cost down.
In theory, it could.
If you pick one and you're bidding that, because they're getting that much more volume and that sort of thing, that you would hope that the businesses would see a reduction in their cost, number one.
absolutely, that is one of the arguments that can be made about that. If a hauler knew that they had exclusive rights to, let's say, 100 dumpsters, right? Naturally, due to that volume, you should see better pricing.
And sometimes, once again, if we enforced the once-a-week emptying and everything else, there could be some businesses that don't fill one once a week, that, once again, the consolidation would help that.
Right.
And they split a cost with somebody, and to do it once a week. And/or it could be even more cost-effective if each one of them did once a week. Even if you put them together, it's twice a week, it still could be cost advantageous. I mean, there's a number of combinations that seem to make sense on the surface. There's no doubt
Yeah,
about it.
absolutely. And I think, what we're looking for tonight is just kind of council's general receptiveness, like, hey, is this a road you want us to go down?
Yeah.
And then we'll get into the weeds on, how can we make this the best?
The other would be is that if we look at enclosures and that sort of thing, is that the type of material that we allow for the enclosures are due to look at long-term situations. I've seen some that are just, a wood picket fence type deal that get damaged and actually look worse than if the
Oh,
dumpster
yeah,
was there.
absolutely.
The gates swing open and the hinges break and sometimes it looks worse. The type of materials they use for these, if we do an enclosure, or to have them do them, make a difference.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'll give some kudos to Miles's team. Tanner's been sending out some letters. I mean, we do have an ordinance that says you have to have your, if the city says so, you need to enclose your dumpster if it's a problem. So nobody wanted to really take that initiative in the past, and that's being reined in. But to your point, yeah, you put a snow fence around your dumpster and call that but I would defer that to the zoning team, but that's an excellent point. The challenge here is, where would you put, a lot of these are in an alley,
Right.
in the public right-of-way. So that your ability to kind of enclose them and make it cosmetically appealing is challenging, but where applicable, absolutely, that's our preference,
Okay.
I
Any other
can tell
questions
you,
from
I
the
deal
council?
with this all the time.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
it's a nightmare, but I can tell you, honestly, you guys have your work cut out for you, picking a partner, because I can tell you the one I have they're not good. And as an example, I pulled my recycling bin. If someone threw a 13-gallon trash bag in my recycle and I didn't get it, I got a $221 fine. I got 3 of them one month without knowing, okay? No clue, just get an extra $663 on my bill. It's $71 if my lid is up. So if my lid does not shut, it's $71. I got 3 of them last month. I mean, it's a challenge, and the first time you have a business that has that happen, if you choose somebody, they're not gonna be happy.
Right, and I think that's an excellent point of kind of I don't want to use names here, but you have extremes in haulers. You have your larger, more Fortune 500 running haulers that are ball busters. And then at the other end of the extreme, you just have this free-for-alls. And so finding that middle ground there is something I think the city can help facilitate. One thing that we may look at just mandating for that whole area, you have to have a lock on your dumpster.
And I think the registration will really help, and don't charge an exorbitant fee, but I know in my alley, and talking with my person who does it, the ones that don't get picked up are the ones that don't pay. So
Right.
if they don't pay, they don't pick up.
That happens a lot.
So absolutely. So you get that buildup because someone didn't pay for a month.
Right.
And you talk about the extremes, my property in Moline, I get that dumped every 2 weeks and it's only $74. But I get my ones here, I have 3 of them that I get dumped twice a week and it's $310.
And the businesses are not stupid. You know, they know, they're like, hey, I'm going to have to navigate down this tight alley. My guy's going to have to get picked out. So their rates adjust the level of headache that they're going to have to experience. So it gets better for everybody if you can turn this more organized as opposed to the Wild West. That would be the hope, at least. So.
Excellent, thank you. Judith, did you have anything?
No, very good presentation, Luke.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, inspections. You demo it till we stick it in the dumpsters.
I will say, the dumpster that's behind my apartment, I have seen so many entire bathroom remodels just thrown in that thing. So, so, good evening, everybody. So, this is the first of a series of presentations that we are hoping to do with all of you, talking about different areas of responsibility that fall within the inspections division. As you know, over the last year and a half, 2 years in CED, we've been working to move things forward, to become a little bit more formalized in how we do things, and evaluate kind of best practices. Are we actually doing things the way we should? So today we want to talk a little bit, just give an overview of the inspections division real quick, and then discuss where we're at with demolition, kind of our policies, our procedures, our best practices, and then get a little feedback from you on that. I am joined tonight by the building official, Jared Irvin. His first time in front of you. Be kind, be gentle. All right. The inspections division is one of the 4 divisions within the CED department. It's headed up by Jared as building official. And very simply, they're responsible for the safety of the built environment, making sure that everything that you might walk into as a structure won't collapse on top of you, and that it's clean and safe, all right? Within the inspections division, we kind of talk about there being 3 subdivisions. One of them is the trades, so that's your HVAC, your plumbing, your mechanical. We have housing and property maintenance, so those are the folks doing your rental inspections, citing nuisance materials, and then we also have health, which is just the health inspector, Brian. Typical duties are exactly what you think: issuing permits, conducting inspections. Anytime someone wants to build anything, they submit plans for review. There's a lot of coordination with emergency services, so let's say there's a big house fire. The fire department will contact Jared, who will come out, make some determinations about what next steps need to be taken, all the rest of it. So, demolitions generally fall into 2 broad categories: emergency and non-emergency. And the distinction is basically this: an emergency demolition situation is one in which there is an imminent threat that the structure in question is going to fall into the public right-of-way or onto another structure. A non-emergency is when the building may be in terrible shape, it may be half collapsed, but it can't easily fall into the street, nor is it going to hurt another building near to it, okay? These are more typically really just eliminating blight. That's the non-emergency. I want to be very, very clear about this. When it comes to demolition, it is a last resort. There is no joy in taking buildings down. It is only undertaken when all other options that are feasible have been exhausted. This is an important point because when we tear down a building, we lose property tax revenue, we lose an opportunity for creative reuse, and we may also lose a part of our built cultural heritage, okay? So we take it very seriously, and it isn't ever done with any sort of lack of thought. So let's talk about emergency demos. Here you see a photo of the Southern Class building at 111 19th Street. It's important that in this case we take note of the fact that this building is at risk of collapsing into the right-of-way, and it's also at risk of collapsing, not strictly speaking onto another structure, but into that parking lot, the one way in and one way out. Okay, so if that wall collapsed into that, it could hit somebody. Okay, could hit a car, could block that passage. It's also important to know that like an emergency demo isn't necessarily happening immediately. Okay. In this case, we've taken steps by erecting fencing around this structure and the one to the north to ensure that no one is close to it. But we are still having to navigate the appropriate legal process, and that takes some time. Emergency demos are uncommon. So, usually we see these in the downtown because things are more compact. They can happen in neighborhoods where houses are close together, but they tend to be very uncommon, and we invoke this emergency language pretty rarely. On average, we're maybe talking about one every other year. I'm going to pass it over to Jared here, who can talk about kind of the standard operating procedures that we've been working to develop, and he's really taken the lead on working on when it comes to these. Yep, talk about the one-by-one here for emergencies.
So for the emergency side,
They want to speak into the mic or they won't hear you.
as Miles said, the one-by-one process is more of the emergency side. So we're working through the two-by-two process, more of a formal, systematic approach to that one as well. This one, case-by-case basis, depending on the ownership of the situation, we have to apply to the circuit court.
Can I interrupt real quick?
Sure.
You might want to explain what the 1x1 and the 2x2.
Okay, so the one-by-one process we refer to it as the one-by-one process due to, that's what they call it, the state statute. In an emergency situation, it's just kind of the application process is a little bit different. We have to apply to the circuit court, have to post a one-by-one dangerous building notice on the structure. So that's why we refer to this type of demolition as a one-by-one process. Just refers back to the state statute. So we apply to that. We apply to the circuit court. We post the building. We apply to the circuit court. Once the circuit court grants us permission to grants us right of entry to the property, we then are able to move forward with the demolition. And then once we get the approval through circuit court, we will take the demolition process out to bid, and then therefore step forward would be to bring that to council for approval to proceed with demolition.
For non-emergency demos, it's a little bit different. This is a house that was in last year's round of non-emergency demos. Burnt out, smaller home at 2507 6th Avenue. When you look at this, you might think, well, that looks like an emergency, but actually it's not. Why is that? It's not at risk of collapsing onto anything nearby. It's not going to collapse into the right-of-way. You can, in fact, secure the site. There's not as much of a time sensitivity matter. And so the class buildings in this building kind of show that line of distinction, right? It may look really bad, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's an emergency. Usually for these, we're talking about abandoned properties which have deteriorated past the point of no return. They might be properties that are owned by no one in particular. So it might have an investor's name from California or Florida on the tax bill, but they're not paying taxes on it. It's not really owned by them. Usually in a given year, we're talking about 4 to 6 houses, and we're using CDBG money for blight elimination to take these down. Some years there's other funding available from different sources to take properties down at greater number. It just varies and depends. In these cases, the city is trying to avoid ownership of these vacant lots unless there's some other reason to do so. This council, of course, have heard me say many, many times that we are trying very hard to not take any more vacant lots under our ownership. We don't have to do this through the 2x2 process, which we'll talk about in a second. Again, these are the most common. We're doing them basically on an annual cycle, which Jared can now talk a little bit about. And again, in this case, 2x2 refers to the fact that in this process, you put a 2-foot by 2-foot notice on it versus a 1-foot by 1-foot. It's the shorthand that we all use because of the way that the actual state statutes are sort of difficult to recall the full citations for just in given conversations. So it's our shorthand.
So, like Miles said, the 2x2 notice stems from the size of the posting that we post in these buildings. It's kind of like a last call. It's a bigger sign, I guess. Maybe that's the reason for the larger sign. But so this process generally starts through our vacant and abandoned foreclosure list of properties that we have. So we're taking a more systematic approach to kind of deciding on which properties would be the best candidates for demolition on a year-to-year basis. We've got a framework in place that scores the properties, prioritizing a structural assessment as the heaviest weight and the factors that we consider, but also we score them through proximity to school, busy streets, parks, and there's a multitude of other factors that go into the grading of the structure, that we then add in all the data, and then it kind of generates a property list based on a score that the most blighted and vulnerable to the least blighted and vulnerable. And that's how, depending on the funding, we then take the top 5, or like Miles mentioned, top 5, 6, whatever funding allows, and we'll provide those addresses, kind of some background information, the score, the criteria, a little summary of the property history, bring it to you guys for approval, and then once we get your guys' approval, we'll move forward with the bidding process, and then at that point, we could come back with a selected contractor and an overall cost for final approval to move forward with the 2x2 demolitions.
One of the things to emphasize about this is stuff that Jared has been developing more recently. In the past, we did this in much the same way, but a little less formulaically. So one of the things that Jared has been working to do is to make it a lot more objective and documentable. So if ever the question is asked, why that building versus this one, we're able to go back and say, well, here's how the scores at that point in time laid it out, and why we prioritized these as the ones you're going to take down. So, and the goal here, of course, is to continue to refine this process and get it to be ever more objective. Now, there's another type of demo that we want to talk about. Certain commercial industrial properties that the city may come to own from time to time. This is the Bear Manufacturing Building at 2016 Fifth Avenue. Thank you again for consenting to buy it. In cases like this, we're buying these because of economic development effort, okay? So we might, in this case, be buying a property, get it out of the cycle of abandonment. It's a prominent property with future development potential. And what we want to do with these moving forward is, prior to going forward with just a demo, assuming that it's obvious that demo is one of the options that's on the table, we want to issue a last call for rehab. Basically, at the same time we issue a call for bids for the demo costs, we want to issue a concurrent call for interesting redevelopment proposals. So the idea here would be that there's an option for someone to come forward and say, I have the means and the idea to rehab this and turn it into something else. Basically to make sure we don't miss out on that opportunity. This won't come up too terribly often, but we are continuing to evaluate some of these properties like Bear, which have been stuck in this cycle of abandonment, not really going anywhere positive. And if it comes up again, we want you to know that this is sort of the approach that we would want to take. So I want to open it up for questions, and one of the things that Jared and I are hoping to get some feedback from council on is this kind of approach to these types of demolitions something that everyone is generally comfortable with? Are there any other things that folks would like to see us include? And just in general, are there questions about how we approach demolition and any concerns about it? So.
Quiet room.
I'll congratulate you and Jared on developing these processes. This is significantly improved from where things were when I started on the city council. There's an actual process and some numbers behind what are we doing here. My only thing would be the addition of the land bank, I think, is an interesting component to all of this. I certainly appreciate the last call for redevelopment that we're doing for some of the commercial properties. I'd like to see us do something like that for some of the residential structures that we tear down, and I think the land bank could play a part in that.
That's a good point. I mean, one of the issues there would just be the ownership question.
Right.
So in most of those 2x2 non-emergency demos that we undertake, we are not going to be the end owner. So the legal process we're using is one in which we just gain the ability to demo it, nothing else.
Right.
So we don't have a right to put it out for bid for rehab or for redevelopment in that kind of situation. If the land bank is involved, though, then we're having different conversations. Now, obviously, I'm the voting member of the land bank for Rock Island. Jared is actually a non-voting member of the land bank board as well. And so moving forward, we'll be helping kind of identify what properties the land bank should pursue ownership of so that those sorts of things can be done. So that'll happen more through the land bank than with the city, but obviously, we will be playing a big part in those discussions.
Right. Ultimately, I think I and a lot of my constituents want to see off-ramps to the cliff that is demolition, right? We have a lot of structures that maybe had somebody gotten there a little bit earlier, it would not have to be demoed.
Yep.
So appreciate the work you've been doing.
Yep.
Any questions? Judith, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here. I have a question. So what's the status of that old parks office? Did that ever get demoed?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
Anybody have anything else? Very good.
If, so we'll be doing a few of these other sessions focusing on rental inspections, the foreclosed vacant abandoned property registry and other things in the months to come. So as the study session schedule allows, we'll be slipping in these periodic things. If there's any topics under the purview of inspections that council members just want to make sure we highlight in the future, please let us know. We'd be happy to provide some more information about where things are at. Again, the CED department is continuing to move forward with making some of these improvements slowly but surely. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. You guys were awful easy on Jared. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?